what is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the 6th album by Australian hard rock band AC/DC. Basically this product is called Highway to Hell, and it came out in the summer. Of 1979. So I wanted to start getting to some further albums before like the early 80s as far as those pitches can happen. I'm going to start covering like some products of like the 70s, 60s, some of those type eras eventually. It's not going to happen just in rapid kind of succession, but there's going to be some of these kind of sprinkled in within some of those type pitches. But this is an album I do halfway remember. Is definitely seen. Highway to Hell is definitely seen as one of AC/DC's biggest albums. I want to say this definitely was one that went complete multi-platinum. Just like when you think of the album Back in Black from 1980, that's one of the highest selling albums of all time. That really, like, really that particular album with Brian Johnson did pretty tremendous as far as those pitches can happen. But the unfortunate thing about this particular album is it's the last one that has the former singer Bon Scott on there, who died in early 1980 as far as those pitches can happen. This is the last taste of that particular sound of AC/DC. Now some folks feel like this was the classic AC/DC. There's kind of like, it's not to say full bound, but there's relative tumult about which particular era, the 70s AC/DC or the 80s AC/DC, which is kind of better. But I do feel like I definitely remember I reviewed Back in Black back in 2023, and I've known about that album for a while. Obviously hearing a lot of those singles on standard hard rock radio and vintage rock radio, but it's just within the pitch. Songs like Back in Black, He Shook Me All Night Long, Hell's Bells, some of those type of ones, Giving the Dog a Bone, just a lot of those particular type ones just continued kind of classic hits that just make it like a staple, and pretty much one of the best rock albums out of the 80s in general as far as this pitch kind of, just a defining type one. Like when you think of Get Rich or Die Trying by 50 Cent, Marshall Mathers LP by Eminem, Dr. Dre's 2001, just a banner kind of album, just not just in the 80s for rock music, but also just rock music in general when you think of classic rock. But this album is just like that. It's another classic here. Just what I'd say, out of the 10 songs in this product, there's really only one that I don't recommend, and this is more signature type stuff. Bon Scott, just to my knowledge, at least from what I've seen with this particular album, is just as good as Brian Johnson was. The thing about Brian Johnson was the particular thing about like Back in Black was just the fact that it kind of had like some Torch kind of energy, where it was kind of a summer fried type album, but it was also haunting with moments like Hell's Bells. Like Hell's Bells, in my opinion, is definitely one of AC/DC's best songs. It has a very vicious pitch about it. Just the riffage on that particular song is just defining in a lot of ways. It's a real gothic type one that they need to do way more of, I'd say, within those pitches. Definitely reminds me of like Ozzy and some of those type areas. I think that there was at least one or two other haunting songs like that on Back in Black. Don't remember as full bound. I do own that album, but I need to throw that on my MP3 player again as far as those pitches can go. But this album is definitely pretty signature here. This kind of has like a horrified type one as well with the song Highway to Hell as far as those pitches can happen. You can tell by the album cover as well that it looks relatively horrific, which is pretty good tone. But it is rooted in the 70s, and it's not to say rooted in the 70s, but it's just kind of the concept. You can see the aspect that it's more kind of saloon type music when it comes to dance hops. A lot of cruise arounds, obviously, you know, MP3 players, Walkmans weren't around back in like 1979, so it's just within the pitch as far as saying that you have to pay attention to like the concept that, you know, it was just more kind of venue saloon hop type noise. This pitch is like that place where you're going to hear like standard dance music and just kind of more blues rock and some of that type of hard rock type tunes. So it's within the pitch, but I do like this particular album. It definitely feels like a defining album of the 70s, despite the fact that it was only around for like 6 months in the 70s. But it's just an excellent type pitch. But it just kind of feels like this album was kind of shoehorned out of the spotlight, considering the fact that this only came out like a year before Back in Black. By the time, you know, just paying attention to this album and then just a year later getting, or less than a year later getting Back in Black, it just kind of felt like the concept that this one was kind of just like, hey, that's old AC/DC as far as this pitch can have. Not to say full bound, but just within the pitch of this. If you bought this album and then like you didn't get the next one, it's just kind of within the pitch that it felt like you're kind of out of, but almost kind of felt like this one was dated just because of the new singer and the new bona fide type hits. And it's kind of the prospect about it. But I mean, it is classic here, just being able to say. It's just easy enough to say that. I mean, but they were kind of doing that. Apparently they had like another album that came out in 1978, and I know they had an album that came out in 1981. They had another album with Brian Johnson as far as this pitch kind of went, which I forget what it's called, but I think it's called For Those That Want to Rock, We Salute You, something like that. That album didn't do nearly as well as Back in Black, but just some good type pitches, so they were just on a pretty good string here. Definitely primary AC/DC, and this is just really like, to the conduct of it, has like a particular last of what particularly went on with Bon Scott, but just within the pitch, to what I saw from Bon Scott, he sounds the exact exact same as Brian Johnson. They have that same kind of banshee-like shriek about them as far as those pitch can have, the same sort of fair, just like the high octane typeness, just about it, just a more gothic type tone, similar to Ozzy, but just kind of within the aspect, just a little bit more kind of summer fried. So it's a good type pitch. But yeah, to talk about the singles here, basically I recommend all three of the singles just within the fair behind it. Now this promotion basically wrapped up right before Bon Scott died as far as those pitches kind of went. This is the concept of what I was talking about was in 1980. Well, he died. Bon Scott passed in early 1980, and they put out Back in Black in like June, July of 1980 as far as those pitches kind of happen. So it's just within the tone that the promotion just went right hop to it just within that fair. But some excellent type pitch kind of get this. So it's just kind of the rhythmic of what kind of happens here. But all three of these singles hit pretty heavily. These are some AC/DC's best from the three albums that I know by them. But I would have to say that Highway to Hell is a nice one. This is a defining song by AC/DC, and it pretty much warrants that on Spotify. It has over 1 billion plays on Spotify, so some good type fair. It's like a similar kind of fiery. Highway to Hell is like a similar kind of fiery summer hop fashion to Shoot to Thrill off of their Back in Black album from 1980. This is like a great taste of warm weather for I'd have to say in particular as far as those pitches kind of happen. So the same summer romps just within the pitch behind it is some of that type fair songs like Giving the Dog a Bone, Shoot to Thrill, some of those type ones. Back in Black just not as defining in the riffage, but actually I would say it pretty much is just within the pitch. I think Highway to Hell can compete with Back in Black as far as those fairs kind of go. Definitely say either one of these songs. When you think of like 70s AC/DC, this is probably like a huge notation. What you would think is Highway to Hell, just a real nice appetite one that just has like a pretty just overall glazed type of feel that works pretty heavily. It's the same thing with Back in Black, that this is back on the scene within that fashion. So this easy enough staple pretty much speaks for itself in a lot of senses. Just a defined type song that you need to hear when you think of 70s type music, I'd have to say. Girls Got Rhythm is a real nice one. This is a song that probably needs more airplay, I'd have to say. This is surprising. Like, I want to say that just within the promotion, I feel like the quality of this album kind of outstrips like the actual promotion of it, I'd have to say. It's just kind of the pitch that they just were relatively brief with. I mean, I realized that they weren't really able to kind of promote this album too much further because Bon Scott passed like less than a year after this album came out, but it's just within the pitch that it did manage to get to the third single, but it's just kind of within the concept that the fair behind it was just relatively kind of shortened within the aspect behind it. It was just kind of the concept that they did have more widespread with like Back in Black, but this is just some good type taste of what happened here. So Girls Got Rhythm is pretty much one of the best songs on this album as well. I'm surprised that this song didn't do better, but this is like a spicy kind of dance venue turn up to kind of get here. This is like some nice groove and boogie of a song kind of get within that tone. Just some outdoor fest fun I would definitely feel like in a hot noisemaker kind of have. So it's just within the pitch, pretty much like the contemporary type song. It's like the most kind of one that has like the most jive about it in like a relative touch sense, like some dance cruise pitches like that. A little bit more like Highway to Hell just feels a little bit more of like a summer romp, just kind of more of like a glaze type fashion of a song like Back in Black, just some of those type of ones, just kind of more cruise type song I would say for Highway to Hell. But this one is a little bit more amongst like the dance venue, get some drinks in your system, some pitches like that, just standard social commotion, some of that type fair, getting some bells dancing, some of that type pitch within it. So it just definitely happens to have that particular aspect about this good type song. Just pretty much this has to be probably top 10 or top 15 of best AC/DC songs I've heard to this point. Now obviously I don't know a super ton about them. I only really know 3 of their albums. They're 79, 80, and 81 albums, but I would have to say these are definitely some of their best ones just within the pitch. Highway to Hell and Girls Got Rhythm are 2 top 15 songs for me in those pitches. And then Touch Too Much is like the third single. This is another nice one here. This is like an after work shift kind of wind down with the bay in mind as far as those pitches kind of happen. Good type tone for that. And just like some glazed summer frolic to kind of get here, and just a straight cruiser to kind of have. So it's just straight cruiser. What I mean by that is just the concept of just after work shift, the concept like, hey, gonna hit up bass. It's the concept of, hey, I'm gonna hit up a bell, some pitches like that, just figure out what's gonna happen, just get towards the tone and just some map out just within the tone behind it. Just kind of the concept of maybe pick up like, bottle of wine or just something standard goodies, just get like some Chex Mix, some of that type fare, just pitches like that, get like snack cake, some of that type fare, just figure out what you're going to do, just get standard supplies and just kind of map out how the evening's going to go just within the concept. Just real nice retire to kind of have within the pitch, not so much retire as in just go home or watch football, go to sleep, but just within the concept as far as saying just the concept of figuring out, not so much retire as far as settle in, watch football or the news or sports, something like that, or just standard program, something like that, but just within the pitch pitch as far as saying that you're going to map out, have a little bit social type fair, figure out what's going to happen with Bay as far as that, figure out what's going to happen with the chicks as far as that particular fair going to happen, then just kind of get towards like kind of figure out what's going to happen with the bell as far as this pitch going to happen, and then just kind of the concept of this, it's kind of the concept of figuring out what's going to happen with the bell as far as this pitch going to happen, and then just get laced as far as this pitch going to go. So it's just good type tone for that, just good type fair. Just would say good 3 singles. This kind of concept makes me wonder what the 4th single would have been off this project had they promoted it further, because I think if Bon Scott had not died, I probably would have said that they probably would have promoted this album a little bit more. I would have guessed that maybe like a song like Shot Down in Flames would have been a good, nice one to have crested throughout the summer of 1980 within that fashion. I'd probably say it's the same thing with like If You Want Blood, You've Got It. Some of those type ones, those probably would have been some nice ones within those relative type pitches, or maybe even Walk All Over You. I probably would have said it might have been like, considering that these were back on vinyl back in those days where you got 4 or 5 songs on one side and 5 songs on the other, I would have said that probably a lot of times, well, sometimes they would put like 3 singles on one side and they'd put like 1 single on the other. So I'll look after it and see what song I probably would have thought would have been the 4th single, but it seemed like it probably would have been either Shot Down in Flames or Walk All Over You or If You Want Blood. So yeah, that's the particular pitch about this album as far as this fair is going to happen there. And I just would have to say, like I was saying, out of the 10 songs on this album, I wound up recommending all of them minus the song Love Hungry Man. So talk about that one. Basically, this song was just kind of a stretcher of a song. It's kind of a romantic stretcher just in the pitch. Very similar to like You Shook Me All Night Long, just a worse variation. That just didn't nail it quite as well just within the pitch behind it. It was just a little bit more of one that just didn't have as much full bound appeal. Just kind of one that was just a little bit more gummy within the senses compared. I mean, I realized that one was aiming for more pop rock and just kind of the pitch of like a more kind of just, you know, starry-eyed kind of romantic type one within the pitch, but it just didn't have the concept as full bound. I just feel like they nailed that particular vibe a little bit better with like the relative glaze and just more like satisfaction of You Shook Me All Night Long. Just had a little bit better pitch behind it, but it's just within a good type of appeal. There was another one off of Back in Black that nailed that pretty well. Let Me Put My Love Into You from Back in Black was another one that really nailed that vibe a lot better, but it's just within the pitch. So this particular album had that only does. So this album's gonna still get a 10 out of 10. I feel like just within the pitch, I know it probably should get like a 9.5 or something like that, but it's just within the fair as far as saying that, you know, just giving the album a song just to be able to say that this album probably should get like a 9.5, something like that out of 10. It's just within the pitch as far as giving the album a spare song to be able to say that at least, you know, on a short album like they were back in the 70s and 80s, just within the pitch to be able to say it doesn't have to be a perfect run, but I look after it. Basic 10 out of 10 here, just classic album, easy enough to see within those pitches. So we'll just go down the list with some of these type highlights here. So basically, like Night Prowler is a real nice one. It's like a murky kind of after hours strolls kind of get within those pitches. Just an easy kind of contemplate noise for like a snack run pitches like that. Good song to ruminate, toke up a bit, and weave through the residential fair as far as those pitches can have just some good type tones for just you and your pals, pitches like that. I'd say good type concepts for that. Just gas station run type music, some of that type fair just in the pitch. Kind of like a relative haunting type one. This one is a little bit different from the rest of the album. I'd say most of this is pretty summer fried. Most of these songs, apart from Highway to Hell, are pretty summer fried within the pitch, and even Highway to Hell, despite being a gothic type song, has some summer variety about it as well. So it's just kind of within the concept. It's a real night aspect of just some after hours demon time type fair. I would say Walk All Over You is pretty similar to like Touch Too Much, just within the same tone. This is like the last moments of work shift, I would say here. Just grab supplies, some pitches like that. Just lace errands up just within the tone. Just a hop for that sort of fair, and this like some summer glaze drift to kind of get within those aspects. Just some real cruise around type ones. Good songs like Walk All Over You, kind of If You Want Blood, You've Got It, some of these type of pitches, kind of Shot Down in Flames, some of these type of fairs, but I just feel like the concept of Walk All Over You is just a little bit one of more that has like that summer romp about it, just within the concept of just it being like 3:30 p.m. pitches like that, maybe just the last moments of work shift in like a cruise around as far as those pitches kind of happen, just figuring out what's going to happen and then getting to songs further in the night like Girls Got Rhythm and Beating Around the Bush and some of those type of ones that I'd say. So it's just a good concept like a conduit type song of just finishing up those last moments of tasks and things like that. Good concept for that. Like I was saying, good. It's also a good song to lace some errands up, get like a box of beer, some of those type of pitches just within the tone. But yeah, I'd say Beating Around the Bush is another quality one that's pretty similar to Girls Got Rhythm. It's like a heavy venue and craze start, ferocity, kind of get out this particular one. Just similar to Girls Got Rhythm, like I was saying, it's just a little bit more get crunk in mind. So this is probably the most ferocious one on here. Now, considering the concept here, I was actually surprised that this particular album did not have more spicy numbers like this particular. I look after the concept that it does particularly kind of have it, but it's just kind of a lot of this is kind of more factored summer romps. I mean, it does have like the barbecue type music, the cookout type music, the socializing, a little bit of venue noise, but in terms of like the most carnivorous, I'd probably say the two ones on here would definitely be Girls Got Rhythm and Beating Around the Bush. Those are probably the ones that make the most kind of dance noise, where you're going to have some drinks in your system or just really get to dance and really get the commotion going as far as, spitting games and those type fairs, as far as that particular one goes. Chatting with your homies, just really making a commotion. I'd have to say good type tones for that. And I'd say Shot Down in Flames is like an Out on the Summer Prowl. Definite nice one here. Very similar to Back in Black from 1980, the single Back in Black, and this is like some late day romps and a good song to situate as far as those fairs going to happen. Yeah, I would say that virtually Shot Down in Flames might as well feel like a song from Back in Black. This is the same sort of pitch, considering the band was the same on that particular album, minus Bon Scott not being. Considering that the band was particularly the same, minus Bon Scott not being there, is the same sort of pitch. This Shot Down in Flames is just pretty much like, you could think, if you don't know the difference between Back in Black and Highway to Hell, it's just the same sort of fair, the same sort of, just has the same sort of context just within the fashion behind it, just the same pitch that they, same sort of Summer Fried type pitch that they were on around that time. Get It Hot's a nice one. This one kind of, Get It Hot kind of has like some 80s greaser kind of vibes about it, 50s greaser kind of vibes that I'd say, same sort of pitch, just a summer romp type one. This feels like a motorcycle pub, some pitches like that, hard rock bar type pitches within that fair. It's like a hot evening backyard kind of occasions kind of get here, just definitely some barbecue, chat, sippage, some pitches like that, good drink type fair kind of have, good chat festivity, some of that type fair within it, some of those type conducts within it. It's like a good commotion for work relief, I'd have to say here. So it's just kind of within pitch after getting done with songs like Walk All Over You, and I'd probably say Touch Too Much, some of those type ones. I just look after the tone. This is some good type fair to just calling up the boys, some pitches like that, figuring out what's going to happen, just a shindig down at this spot, getting ready to get towards the pitches behind it, just get the burgers going, some of that type fair, get the standard noise within those commotions, just the aspect behind it. This is like a more backyard type occasion compared to like the more venue type. This is more backyard type occasions compared to like the venue type noise of Beating Around the Bush and Girls Got Rhythm, I'd have to say. But it's the same sort of commotion, just different days for different summer festivities. So it's a good type concept for some of those type ones. It really has the summer frolic about it. If You Want Blood, You've Got It is a quality one as well. It's like a Feeling Fine kind of out on the summer town kind of jive kind of get here. Just If You Want Blood, You've Got It's like a Feeling Fine kind of out on the summer town fun to kind of get within those pitches. Just the jive of like Girls Got Rhythm with like some cruise fun about it as far as those fairs going to happen. So this particular song, If You Want Blood, You've Got It, definitely has the summer commotion about it. I'd have to say just a good type concept here. That basically the groove and the Feeling Fine type energy of like some of the singles and some of the more venue type energy just within the concept of being more out on the town like a cruise type sense. So it's just kind of the concept of just being just having a little bit more vehicle centricness in mind, but just the same. Just the concept of like some pep to your step kind of excitement, summer excitement, just within the concept of like some vehicle centricness in mind as far as those fairs can have, and just the tone behind it, just kind of, just real pep, just of that sort of fair, just real good concept, it's kind of a more balmy type mood to be able to have for some of that commotion, just relative, just breezy kind of day as far as those pitches can have a good type fair for that. If you like the concept, so it pretty much goes well with Girls Got Rhythm. I would pretty much almost say in certain senses, just a little bit less dance centric in mind, but within the concept, this is probably another one that could be played within the same dance night as like Girls Got Rhythm and like Beating Around the Bush and Highway to Hell, some of those type ones. So there are a number of social commotions on here. I just had to say a good type concept for that. So the concept behind this album, I'm basically going to give this album like a 10 out of 10, like I was saying. Social Score will probably get like a 9.75. It's just within the pitch because I just question how the promotion of this album would have fared better just within the pitch had Bon Scott not been here. But you look within the pitch that Back in Black was a classic album as well. Not to say within that fashion as far as that being the determining, but just being able to say within the aspect of this was like a heralded type time for AC/DC. Just they were going through the motions, getting two of the highest selling rock albums of all time within the pitch. Just both these went multiple platinum within the pitches behind it, especially Back in Black. So it's just within the fair. I'm going to eventually review like for those about to rock, We Salute You, because I want to say that was an album that was kind of compared to these two albums, Highway to Hell and Back in Black was kind of seen as one, like I was saying, that was just not as fiery, kind of one that was kind of not necessarily a dud, but just kind of lukewarm. I know it didn't have a song as crazy as like the lead singles off of these two albums, so it's just in the pitch. We'll have to see about that one. I'll eventually get to it, but it's just within the fair that this is another classic here and a defining album out of the 70s, despite not being around that long before. So that's the pitch, but in terms of the future, like I'm not as full-bound sure what AC/DC has been up to to in these recent times. Understanding the concept that understanding the concept that this 1979 album was actually their sixth album. Understanding the concept that this 1979 album was their sixth album as far as this pitch can happen. So I don't know when their first album came out. Probably 1970, somewhere in there. Just real pitches. They've been around for almost 6 or 7 decades as far as those pitches can happen. So it's a good type tone for that. But I do know that they at least dropped an album in 2014. That's the last one I remember paying full blown kind of attention to. But I think they've definitely dropped an album since then. But I'm just not sure as to when. Just kind of within the pitch. But I would have to say some good type stuff here and another classic, simple enough to kind of see. Just excellent aspect, just defining album of the 70s.